Okay, welcome everybody to the last session of today, the first day of COPE's Publication Integrity Week. Welcome to this plenary session and good morning, good afternoon and good evening, depending where you are in the world. The theme this year for COPE's Publication Integrity Week is exploring the landscape of publication integrity together. And for this plenary session, we wanted to bring together thinkers and actors in the area to cover the breadth of some of the key themes in publication integrity across the globe. From new technologies, new policies, and new opportunities, our speakers today are going to remind us about some of the core principles in upholding publication integrity as we move forward to this future together. Our esteemed speakers joining us today, Dr. Eleni Spyrakou, Dr. Limbanazo, Matandika, and Dr. Maryam Zaringhalam will each share a brief overview from their perspective of some of these key themes. As I mentioned, this is a short session, just 30 minutes long, without time for questions to get you all excited about some of the topics that we'll be diving deeper into in the rest of Publication Integrity Week. So with that, I'll hand over to our speakers, going alphabetically by first name, with Eleni speaking first. Over to you, Eleni.
Thank you. Hello to all. And I would like to thank COPE for this kind invitation and for this great opportunity to contribute to this initiative. As you probably know from the introductions, my background is in philosophy, but I've been working on emerging technologies and research ethics and research integrity that are relevant to this type of research. So when we try to explore the landscape of publication integrity, actually we get exactly to the core of the landscape of research and of new technologies in general, since publication is not just the end of a continuum of the research endeavor, but at the same time becomes the starting point for new developments and for training new researchers and students. Publishing is within all stages of research development. This means that any ethical issues, any integrity issues that are relevant to research as such are also relevant to publication ethics. So when we discuss about emerging technologies and to the extent that there are challenges, ethical challenges emerging, sometimes we ask whether these challenges are new or are just relevant to these types of technologies that are current, very, let's say, popular, or we need to deal with issues that we have dealt in the past. Do we have new challenges, or do we need to face? Are we facing issues that, for instance, in past stages of the development of science, we had to deal with? So let's say my research question is whether we can learn from the past and we can identify, let's say, the same issues and maybe respond to them in the same way. And if they are the same, to what extent there are some differences that are more challenging, let's say, and we need to address them in a different way. So in the past, we have historical examples from the previous couple of centuries with the Industrial Revolution, with the nuclear, let's say, developments and biotechnology developments that brought into the forefront discussions about, let's say, privacy issues, surveillance, issues about fairness, autonomy, human agency, security and dual use issues, but also the social impact of what was new back then, and labor impact, and also the environmental footprint. All these issues that we have discussed in the past are also present in the current, let's say, discussion. They seem to be put in a more emphatic way, but at the core, I think they remain the same. So the question is whether we can respond to these challenges in the same way that we responded in the past, and in a way to be optimistic that things change, but at the same time we can maintain, let's say, some stability and some common language, or we are in a, let's say, in a floating river that everything changes. I think that is the first, but this is always open to the discussion. And to this point, it's really important, even within, let's say, the publication process, to maintain the proper, let's say, use of language and communication in order to address these issues and respond to these challenges, and at the same time to try to avoid hype. And I understand that this type of new technologies are really, let's say, they create a lot of fuss and a lot of expectations. The AI applications is a very good example, but at the same time, I think that we need to maintain to keep our let's say, our scientific humility, if I may say, and try to avoid hype. So we see that there are recurring patterns, there are recurring issues which are central in all given times of the development of science and the development of technologies. But at the same time, we realize that there might be something different now, a little bit different. And I think this has to do with the speed that things change, the element of time and the way that we need to adapt to these changes. In all given times, time was an issue. We had to give to the public the time to adapt, to understand, and then after some time, things we're getting back to normal, and what was regarded as something really strange after some certain time was becoming very, very normal and accepted. Now time is pressing more, so in a way we need to find a way to adapt more rapidly. However, I think that the core of the discussion is the same, and this makes me, let's say, be quite optimistic. So I think that we still have the tools, we still have the theoretical tools to adapt to these kind of challenges. If we at least we implement a kind of anticipatory approach and by design approach, ethics by design that we say all the time, or integrity by design, and try to anticipate the challenges, because there are more new things to come, I'm sure. We might be here next year to discuss something completely new, but at the same time, based on these, let's say, common roots of the way that human knowledge evolves. So I don't know if I have one more minute. One more minute, thank you. Just to say that within this framework, some of you might have been involved in the past in the World Conferences on Research Integrity, and the Athens statement, which was the main output of the previous conference, is being redrafted and finalized. So if you have been involved in the previous conferences, you will soon hear from us because we will collect again your input, and hopefully we will be able to present the final results and the final Athens statement next year in Vancouver in the next conference. And with that, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleni, and especially for the brief update about the Athens statement. I appreciate the tone of optimism about new technologies and how quick they're coming at us. And that reminds me, I need to correct myself that there is one more session after this one, after a 15-minute break on how technology is being used to support publication of research. So that should be really interesting, and please make sure to stick around for that. And with that, I will hand over to Limbanazo to give us her perspective on where research integrity and publication integrity is going. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. So I'm Limbanazo Matandika. I'm calling from Malawi, and I am currently the Vice Chairperson of the African Research Integrity Network. And I've also the guest editor of the Clinical in Epidemiology, the Journal of Clinical and Epidemiology, basically in the Research Integrity series call that has been run through 2024 to 2025. And currently, I am also a lecturer in the Kamuzu University of Health Sciences in the Bioethics, Behavior and Social Science Department. And this afternoon, I would like just to share perspectives from a low and middle income country during this plenary of changing scholarly publication as we know it. Firstly, allow me to send my acknowledgement to COP for the invitation and support to be part of Publication Integrity Week 2025. And also just appreciation to the African Research Integrity Chairperson and ESCO members, and also the rest of the plenary session members. One thing that I would like to highlight is about the African Research Integrity Network, just briefly. The African Research Integrity Network is one of the networks that was instituted after a couple of African members attended the World Conference in Research Integrity. That was 2015. And what we noted from the conference was a gap in Africa to promote and also provide awareness about research integrity. Therefore, the network was initiated as an initiative to promote research integrity in Africa. And I will be sharing my perspective this afternoon from a low and middle income setting. So firstly, I would just like to take you through the publication integrity, especially highlighting how it has been visualized in an eco context. And as we're speaking about publication integrity, we've heard more speeches about how the research integrity landscape has changed altogether. What does that reflect in an eco context where we're still developing, we don't have resources, and there are a couple of structural challenges that we look. So we've talked about research integrity in a couple of forums, looking at issues of falsification, plagiarism, questionable research practices. When we're talking about publication integrity, there are issues of authorship. However, when we're talking about research integrity in an eco context where there are a lot of challenges or structural challenges, research integrity goes beyond misconduct. And they could be reflected in three structural issues. The first could be issues of capacity, culture, and systems. And I would like to reflect on the African context where we are currently in regards to research integrity. Basically, when we're talking about the African context, there is limited levels of support and funding for publication integrity and also research integrity. Basically, not only for research integrity, but also for research in context. And we've also talked about the emergence of different technology advancements. Right now, we're talking about artificial intelligence that could be used even in publication, even research integrity. But when it comes to the African continent, there is limited access to these AI tools and also computational infrastructure, which also widen the gap on which knowledge counts and shapes research as we are talking about the emergence of artificial intelligence tools that could be promoted to ensure that responsible conduct of research is being promoted. And another quick mention for me is the research landscape in Africa, where we're seeing a lot of research teaching universities do not have a strong research culture. And as they are striving to catch up with various research landscape within the institutions of higher learning, there is the concept of pressure to publish, where a lot of faculty members, researchers within these institutions are being pressured to publish in order, for example, to enhance their career and also their career in the research landscape or institutions of higher learning. But recently, in the research integrity area, we are talking about new research assessment tools. And this is also bringing in a gap where other institutions of higher learning, other researchers in the scholarly publishing are trying to catch up, and there is pressure to publish. And there is already a shift in norms where new tools for assessment are also being implemented. And as we mentioned that in Africa, most of the initiatives that are being initiated are not normally established, or there isn't a culture, but integrity efforts are often reactive, for example, to certain scandals that are there in the research scholarly landscape, but they are not yet institutionalized. So, for example, we've seen the great shift in trying to catch up with the world, and the recent achievement that we've seen in Africa was the Cape Town Statement in Fostering Research Integrity that was initiated in 2022, that was trying to promote fair research and equitable partnership. But through the Cape Town Statement, there was a scandal that we discussed in Africa that we termed it as parachute research, where researchers from the global north came in Africa during the COVID-19, came to collect data, and they left the continent without even having issues of authorship agreements on how the data that was collected at that time during COVID-19 is going to be published. And following that, there was now in Africa an initiative to look at how can we address a helicopter research. So as I mentioned that in Africa, a lot of efforts are not yet institutionalized. There isn't a culture or capacity to promote research integrity. And there is also a widened gap in systems that could promote research integrity. But most of the pocket initiatives that are there are just a reaction to scandals or research misconduct that happen. So I wanted to reflect the persistent gaps and the global dependence that is there by just highlighting a case that I found in LinkedIn, a post that highlighted the dependency, especially when we are looking at issues of authorship, where young researchers have to depend to already established researcher, but not within Africa, but especially where research is being conducted through collaboration, as I highlighted, that normally a lot of research initiatives in Africa are through collaboration. And a young researcher was trying to publish his paper in a high reputable journal. And in the first submission, the paper got rejected. And after that, he sort of gotten assistance from a well-renowned or a well-known professor. And he got accepted to publish the same paper in the same journal. And now the young researcher had a second chance to submit the paper to the journal. And this time around, the paper was accepted. And he went back to check the differences between the first submission and the second submission. And to the surprise, there wasn't a lot of differences in the first submission, but he realized that in the publication or scholarly publication landscape, also having well-established researchers also do enable young researchers to get their papers get published. Therefore, this also just brings us to highlight the persistent gaps and the global dependencies that we can continue to reflect on how low and middle income settings, like most of the countries in Africa are facing the dependency of Northern Partnership for publication and also AI infrastructure that we don't have in Africa. We can also talk about the power dynamics in authorship and editorial decision makings that are also emerging. And as we are talking about the emergence of AI, where we can see that there is still a gap in Africa to contribute to how these AI tools are going to be developed, how are issues of power dynamics and editorial decision makings going to account the landscape in Africa. And I've also mentioned that there is need to make sure that as these tools are being developed and tools are emerging and moving forward, there has to be context-specific or context-appropriate tools that needs to be developed. And as I highlight that mostly integrity cannot be imported, but it should be something that is grown within the context, within the systems, within the tools that are being developed to promote scholarly publication integrity or research integrity in the overall landscape. So as I move forward, I just wanted to highlight how an inclusive publication integrity could be realized, especially from a low and middle income setting. There is need to continue building capacity and also institutionalizing publication integrity locally, because as we be competing on a global context, but we don't have the resources and the tools at a global at a local level. Therefore, there is need to ensure that at local levels, especially in settings that do not have resources, capacity has been built. There is enough infrastructure and systems to promote research integrity. And also the aspect of promoting equitable authorship and open collaboration. These are the current norms that we're talking about, but there is also a threat as we're looking at the gaps that are there within the scholarly landscape altogether. And also the issues of strengthening mentorship and oral career support. And lastly, making sure that as global partners, as we are creating, as we are developing new tools, there is need to co-create and not initially impose, because, for example, in low and middle income settings, there isn't a lot of contribution or a lot of opportunity to provide or contribute to the development of the new technologies that are emerging. And lastly, my reflection is to thank you for the time and thank you for listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Limbanazo. I really liked your comment on your last slide about that integrity can't be imported, it has to be grown. And I think that that really aligns with some of the other messages we've been hearing today about the importance of not having perverse incentives at an institutional level, and this really starting much further upstream than strictly publication integrity. So with that, we're going to come to Maryam, who I believe is going to share some slides.
Yes.
Okay, with that, I'll hand over to you, Maryam. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some thoughts. Good morning from DC, where I'm coming to you from. So my name is Maryam Zaringhalam. I am the Senior Director of Policy at the Center for Open Science. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Center for Open Science, we are a nonprofit organization with a mission to increase the openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. So given our mission, we've been thinking a lot about a May 2025 executive order on in the US on restoring gold standard science was the title. Now, I recognize that you're all a global audience, which is beautifully reflected in this panel here. And COS is indeed an organization with a global mission. But I do think that while this executive order applies to research in the US, there are some global themes that we can take away here. So there's a lot to be said about the general framing of the order and good faith versus bad faith implementation, but I only have 7 to 10 minutes, so I will make only a few points here. So the first is that the principles are generally good if we first recognize that they are things that we can aspire and work towards and have been working towards for quite some time. that they are not all universally applicable to all avenues of inquiry. I think especially about number 6, structured for falsifiability of hypotheses, which rules out entire lines of inquiry. And that all of these principles require sufficient resourcing and infrastructure to enact well, as I'm sure there will be a lot of discussions and have long been discussions around infrastructure needs for meeting these research integrity tenets. Second, I have an issue with the framing of the executive order, which is that it sets the research community into a sort of defensive posture by implying that we have completely lost trust in research. And so we have really nice longitudinal polling from the Pew Research Center in the US that shows us that in general, confidence and trust in scientists to act in the public good, the public interest, remains high. That trust really breaks down around areas of research that have become politicized. So we do see a dip in around the time of COVID. And certainly the examples outlined in the executive order are those highly politicized examples. This is really important, I think, for me personally to keep in mind, because I think there's a way in which some fall into a trap of thinking that trust in science, trust in research is degrading. And so we can't afford to make mistakes and transparently own up to those mistakes, that there's no wiggle room for us to be wrong. But being wrong is, of course, okay. It is part of the research process. In fact, it's inevitable when we consider that research is really fundamentally about asking questions of the unknown. And in doing so, we're bound to get things wrong. And so what's really important is the transparency piece of this, that when we get things wrong, we engage in discourse around it and we seek to get things right. So this is a study from 2016, so it's a bit old. But I think the takeaway is good, that surveyed 5,000 adults in the US on a variety of scenarios to understand whether they perceived a given researcher as being able, ethical, and that their findings were true. So in this scenario, I'll just break it down a little because this graph is intense. So researcher X publishes an interesting study that either an independent researcher Y attempts to replicate or researcher X attempts to self-replicate. And so researcher X is perceived to be more able and ethical regardless of whether their results replicate or not. What matters is whether they transparently engage with and recognize the failure to replicate and that their initial result may not have been correct. So whether they concede that they might have been wrong. In other words, this study suggests that what matters for trust is whether we are willing and able to own up to our mistakes and engage in dialogue to get us closer to the truth, as opposed to sweeping it under the rug. So since our founding, COS has worked to offer community-developed policy frameworks as well as tools to promote the transparency of research findings. One of these efforts has been the development of the Transparency and Openness Promotion, or TOP guidelines, which were initially developed in 2015 and have since been updated in 2025. And you can learn more about the update here with this link. The objective of the guidelines is to increase the verifiability of empirical research claims. So the framework outlines 7 research practices that result in discrete open research outputs that increase the transparency of empirical research studies. These open research practices enable the verification practices of evaluating the comprehensiveness of reporting and checking computational reproducibility. And these open research and verification practices together further enable verification studies that offer specific empirical research designs and publication formats focused on verifiability. Importantly, this framework can be tailored to meet community needs, norms, resource constraints, and so on. So it can be tailored in ways that make sense for different communities. So it's really meant as a tool to build community understanding of expectations around transparency, openness, and research integrity. And we're in the process of developing different implementation guidance for publishers, research institutions, and funders for this guidance. And we'll be starting a 6-month push around with webinars and informational resources to really enable engagement from you all as well as other members of the research community. Now, I wanted to end my remarks with a third point, which is that openness and transparency are a means to build trust. They are not on their own a way to, earn trust. They are markers of credibility for sure, but they are not enough to earn and maintain that trust. And so I think of this a bit as giving people, making things like flour, eggs, sugar, chocolate chips, butter, openly available and saying to, consumers, readers, members of the public, enjoy this cookie without asking first, what's their kitchen setup? Have they baked before? Would they prefer bake and bake? Do they even like cookies? In other words, what do they need and how can we meet them where they are in order to make these raw ingredients that we have made openly available into something that is delicious and digestible and meaningful to them? And I think it becomes even more complicated when we think about the realities of our information landscape. Because on top of all of these raw ingredients for a cookie, there's all this other stuff out there of varying quality, relevance, integrity that comes up as people are searching for information. And so how do you make sense of that chaotic soup, especially when people who aren't steeped in expertise or are antagonistic towards expertise, have a buffet of outputs from which they can pick and choose a reality that confirms their prior beliefs, that's maybe more digestible or easier to sort of sit with them. So what we really need to be thinking about is how can we layer on top of open outputs avenues for meaningful community engagement and participation so that we are building bridges of trust throughout the research lifecycle. Not only that we are communicating out, but we are creating bridges in towards the research community. And this is really hard to fix. Plain language summaries on their own won't fix it. Persistent identifiers on their own won't fix it. Making publications more machine interpretable on its own won't fix it. This is the really difficult sort of like the social infrastructures layered on top of the technical infrastructures. And so I think a lot about, and we don't talk about this enough in the US context, the 2021 UNESCO recommendation on open science, where complementing open science knowledge and infrastructures is this need for open engagement of societal actors and open dialogue with other knowledge systems. These to me feel really key in thinking about how scholarly communication and open scholarship moving forward needs to be building common ground where research integrity really means something, where we're building those avenues of trust layered on top of all of the work that we are doing around more open, integral, integrity worth. I don't know exactly what the adjective there is, knowledge systems. So with that, I thank you so much for your time, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you all so much. And also, Maryam, thank you for the tastiest analogy of the day, for sure. I want to thank all of the speakers so much. I think that it's clear that there is as many avenues to consider publication integrity as there are people on this session. And the topics we talked about today are just some of the themes that are going to keep coming up again and again, whether it's access, whether it's transparency, whether it's embracing the future. These themes will come up again and again during the week, and I hope everybody has enjoyed the session and feel like they got something from it. So with that, I thank the speakers so much for their time today. Bye.